Leaving Mauricio Dubón as the full-time shortstop in 2026 could be just fine if everyone else does their job, but that's just not a risk I'm willing to take.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. Also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop. Check out the podcast there at Locked On_Braves on X, Locked On Braves, wherever you get your social media. If you're on YouTube, you can help out as well. Just hit that subscribe button, that thumbs up button. Leave us a comment down below. Thank you so much for your support there on the podcast. Doing great views here lately in the off season. I appreciate all your support. As well on the audio side, where we still get the majority of our listeners, you can help out as well. Just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your very first listen of each and every day, or every night if you're able to join me live. Thank you so much for all your support here at Locked On Braves, being an everydayer. Got some exciting news coming your way in the next couple of weeks about that too. Today's episode, we're going to take a look at what if Mauricio Dubón is the full-time shortstop, and what if the Braves don't find another big bat for the lineup? Could it be okay? Could this Braves offense be just fine? Also tell you what I think should happen for the rest of this offseason, looking at the lineup. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So you had the big news yesterday, Raisel Iglesias coming back. I think we all knew that was likely going to happen. Maybe it was for a little bit more than some of us at least were hoping, but I think a lot of us knew that the Braves and Raisel Iglesias were probably going to have some sort of reunion. The big thing we've all been waiting for, though, is who's going to be the new shortstop. And at least for now, it looks like it's going to be Mauricio Dubón. Now, Alex Anthopoulos said they still continue to look for a shortstop, and if that happens, Dubón will be a great utility guy who can fill in everywhere, which is, I think, where he ultimately probably should be. But he also hinted at the fact that they're fine if Dubón is their shortstop going into 2026. And as we ventured down this path of what could be if Dubón is in fact the everyday shortstop going into 2026, perhaps we look through the rest of this off season and Scott Boras is using the Braves' desperation to drive up the price to Ha-Seong Kim to a place where the Braves just aren't comfortable, aren't going to be willing to go. At some point Alex is going to say, okay, you're like that, I'm not talking to you anymore. And let's also just say that, as we've talked about already, the shortstop market is very thin this offseason. And so it's very realistic that Boras, being the great client that he is, knows that and is pushing that and is demanding that price and pushing that price up to a place where the Braves just aren't going to go. And in my opinion, shouldn't go if it gets too high on Ha-Seong Kim, because I do think you're overpaying for a guy who in his best years is league average offensively. I'm not overpaying, $20 million plus a year for that. And let's just say that is the case. And you're, I don't want to say stuck, but you're stuck with Mauricio Dubón as your everyday shortstop going into 2026. Could this lineup still be good enough? And let's just look quickly at what the lineup would look like in this scenario. Acuna in your leadoff spot, career 143 WRC plus. Profar behind him, career 101 WRC plus, but it's been 122 and 139 the past 2 years. Olsen at first base, 133. O'Reilly at third base, 122. Baldwin at DH catcher, 125. Ozzie at second base, 105. Murphy at DH catcher, 111. Michael Harris in center field, 106. And then Dubón at shortstop, 85. So you just look at that lineup and the career WRC plus of those players. Again, 100 is league average. Every hitter has a career WRC plus over 100 except for Dubón. And you even look at projections for 2026, which are built off of those career numbers that I just gave you. Everyone in the projected 2026 roster with Dubón is projected to have a WRC plus over 100, except for Sean Murphy, which they have projected just under at 98, and Dubón at 88. And even last year, And look, I'm not that far removed. I know how bad the offense was last year, but if you take a little bit of a step back and just look at it number-wise for certain players, everyone in that lineup I mentioned above had a WRC plus over 100, except for Murphy, who was at 97, Ozzie at 87, Michael at 83, and Nick Allen all the way down at 66. Again, as I take a step back and further remove myself from the season, not remembering or not forgetting how bad it was, there were two key reasons why the Atlanta Braves offense was as bad as it was last season. I think one, in the first half, I talked about it a lot. I think they were stuck in between the Tim Hires approach and their all or nothing approach. And I feel like it took them a while to adjust. And the biggest thing, in my opinion, was just situational hitting. They were so bad. Again, it's particularly in the first half in situational hitting. And the other thing too is, look, I'm not one of those to blame everything on injury, but of those 6 guys I mentioned who had a WRC plus over 100 last year, only 2 of them played more than 124 games, in Olsen and Ozuna. So look, there's reason to believe, and I know I'm being optimistic, and I'm speaking to the optimistic crowd, and I know that's not the majority, because I read all the comments on the last video where they said I wasn't pessimistic enough. I know I'm being optimistic right now, but I do truly believe, like we've said the last 2 years, that if these guys all stay healthy, if they all play to their potential, it's a top 10 lineup. It's a top 10 offense, potentially a top 5 offense. I really, truly believe that, especially if you consider, again, thinking optimistically here, another year under Tim Hires and adjusting to his approach, which we saw start to pay off in the second half as you got, Profar back, as you got Ronald back as well, although the offense wasn't great, I get, when Ronald first returned, but I think you started to see that approach change, be a little bit different in the second half. You get more assistance from Chipper this year, who said he's going to be around more often. It can't be much worse for Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies than it was last year. Look, there's plenty of reason for optimism for the guys that they currently have and that lineup that I just gave you. I mean, most teams would love to be sitting here in the offseason and see a lineup of Acuna, Profar, Olsen, Riley, Baldwin as their top 5 hitters, and guys like Ozzie, Murphy, Michael Harris, and Dubón, guys who have produced in the past. Most teams would love to be sitting here at this point of the offseason and have that lineup. I get that, and I get the optimism behind that for those of you out there. I know Everydayer Mass Boost keeps telling me they don't need another bat, that this lineup is good enough. Where are they going to put another bat? I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that, but I can understand having that sense of optimism that if everything goes exactly according to plan, that this lineup could be really, really good. My problem and my frustration is that feels like a lot of hope after we've said that for the last 2 years. And look, this isn't a rebellion. You can't build a team on hope. And I can paint plenty of scenarios where things go poorly for this team. What if it takes forever again for Ozzie's hand wrist area to heal, and that power, takes another half of baseball to come back? What if Michael Harris can't figure out the plate discipline issues that he has, and maybe he does get worse? What if Murphy, can't stay healthy, or what if this surgery doesn't fix the issues that he's had offensively? What if Baldwin struggles in his sophomore season? What if Acuna, Olsen, or Riley go down for a significant period of time? There are plenty of ways that I can also look at a doomsday approach with this team. And I get everybody can do that. I get that. But after what you've seen the past 2 seasons and all the injuries that you have seen and all of the regression that you have seen, I'd be pretty disappointed if you don't go over the top this offseason to improve the depth of your lineup. And that's why I think it's imperative that if Dubón is the guy at shortstop, which, okay, fine. If that is ultimately the case, they have to find another bat or 2. And so next, I want to talk about who those bats could potentially be. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Checking out FanDuel.com right now. The Atlanta Braves still have their odds necessarily increase with the big moves that they made yesterday. But, they are hopefully going to creep up as the offseason goes along. They're still at plus 2,000 to win the World Series next year, but they do have the fourth best odds to win the National League behind the Dodgers, Phillies, and Mets. Unfortunately, two of those teams in their division, but you want to check out the NBA? Maybe you moved on to the NBA. They got NBA Finals odds over there, NBA Cup Finals odds, award odds, all of that. NHL stuff out there too, NFL, college football, pretty much anything you want to look at. You can see those odds right there on FanDuel.com. Also, please make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day, solely getting caught up on everything happening around Major League Baseball. Got another deadline coming up on Tuesday for players that you are going to non-tender. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a moment as well, as the Braves already made one announcement on that front. And make sure you are subscribed here to Locked On Braves. We'll have at least one more episode this week. We'll have our mailbag episode on Friday. Look for a post from Locked On _Braves on X on Friday morning, asking for your question. Submit your question to that post to be answered on Friday afternoon's live edition of the mailbag podcast here for Locked On Braves. As I said, for me personally, while I do believe that if everything went right, the Braves would be perfectly fine with the lineup they have, if everybody stays healthy and everybody performs to the best of their ability, not even the best of their ability. We know 2023 is an outlier at this point, but even if they just play to their career norms, this offense could be fine. I feel like that's risky, and that's hoping for a lot after what I've seen the last 2 years when we've hoped upon that everybody would stay healthy and everybody would perform. So for me, just sitting back and doing nothing else to help the lineup would be a big mistake for this team. Now, let's throw out the dream scenario for now. Let's assume we're not getting the big bat like Cody Bellinger, who I like. You're definitely not getting Kyle Tucker. You're not getting Bo Bichette. You're not trading for Corey Seager, who the Braves are on his no-trade list. Doesn't mean that it can't happen. It's just does make things a little bit more challenging. You're not getting Pete Alonso. You're not getting Murakami. You're not getting Bregman. You're not getting Buxton. You're not getting Ketel Marte. You're not getting Kyle Schwarber. Let's take out the big, what I would consider a big bat this offseason. You're not getting any of those guys. And obviously, we're assuming you're not getting Ha-Seong Kim, who I've never considered to be the big bat addition of this offseason, even if it were to happen. So let's just assume none of that is taking place. For me personally, I'm looking for two bats this offseason. I'm looking for a righty killer. I'm looking for a lefty killer. I'm looking for somebody that can handle the outfield. I would like for it to be center. I'm looking for somebody that can play all over the infield. Those are the type of bats that I am targeting this offseason to be part of my DH, part of my rotation in the field, my backups, my bench players. And I get for free agents, it's hard to convince these guys to sign, come in. You may only play 4 or 5 days a week. If everybody's healthy, it's going to be really hard to get you the at-bats. But I still think the Braves need to try their best to get as many of these guys in as they can to help out the lineup and create more depth on the team. So I'm going to run through a list of some guys who crush righties, some guys who crush lefties that I think fit this mold. Let me know which one of these that you really like, that you think fits the best, guys that I don't think will be overly expensive to either sign or trade for. And the first one is Ryan O'Hearn, projected to make 2 years, or projected to sign for 2 years, $26 million, so about $13 million a year. Career 737 OPS against righties. However, it's been 777 or better the last 3 years, and in the last 2 years, it's a 124 WRC plus against right-handed pitches as a left-handed hitter. I think maybe the only downside with Ryan O'Hearn is that he probably should be a DH first baseman. But again, the DH spot is open, in my opinion. So I have no problem with that. Now, he can stand in a corner outfield spot if needed. So you also have that luxury as well. I would love to trade for Wilyer Abreu or Jaron Duran. Both of those guys have been really good against right-handed pitching. I just don't think that the Braves match up with what the Red Sox need. Just, quickly listening to some podcasts, reading some articles on what the Red Sox need this offseason. Sounds like they need a top-of-the-rotation pitcher to match with Crochet, and it sounds like they need a big bat. Braves don't really have any of those to give away right now for a team in the Red Sox that is likely trying to compete. So while I do like Wilyer Abreu, Jaron Duran, I think they would obviously be solid additions, guys who can play all over the outfield, guys who can crush right-handed pitching. I just don't think the Braves and the Red Sox match up unless the Red Sox want some, pitching prospects, because that's really all the Braves have a surplus of that they can give. I don't think you're going to want to trade, Hurston Waldrop, maybe not even to J.R. Ritchie, who's knocking on the door, but that's likely what it's going to have to cost you if you want one of those guys. Some other players here, Brendan Donovan, 132 WRC plus against righties. All these WRC plus numbers I'm going to give you are over the last 2 years. So obviously can handle right-handed pitching, high contact guy, can play all over the infield, can play corner outfield if needed. He just feels like a very popular name right now, which is why I am high on Brendan Donovan. Would love to get him for his contact skills, ability to put the ball in play. I think it's the type of hitter the Braves are starting to look for and lean towards, and a guy that can play all over. I wouldn't put him at shortstop too much, but, could fill in there if needed. And again, just really like the bat, but he seemed like a really popular name. His name is all over the place right now, and that just leads me to believe the Braves won't be in on him. Brandon Lowe from the Rays, 1 more year left at $11.5 million, so a pretty decent price tag there, but not overly outrageous. A 130 WRC plus against right-handed pitchers the last 2 years. High strikeout rate, which I don't love, can't stay healthy, and really doesn't belong in the field. So if you're getting Brandon Lowe, you are getting him pretty much to be the DH and backup second baseman. And so I don't love that he doesn't have the versatility to play in the field as much as some of these other guys I'm going to mention. Harrison Bader, a 116 WRC plus against righties the last 2 years and can handle center field well. So you got some insurance there for Michael Harris if he were to stumble or get hurt. Can play obviously all over the outfield, but the fact that he can especially play center field really boosts him up a little bit, in my opinion. Josh Smith from the Rangers, a 112 WRC plus the last 2 years against righties, can play all over the infield. I know a lot of people have asked me about Josh Smith in the past as a possible guy to just be the Braves shortstop. I don't think you can put him out there at shortstop every day, but definitely can handle the position in a pinch if needed, or even to fill in for a time. So he would be a good candidate as well for the Braves to go after to fill that role. And then I'm going to go ahead and mention Marcell Ozuna. Look, I'd rather it not be him, just because, as I've hammered all offseason and even during last season and even last offseason, as pointing towards this offseason when we knew Ozuna's contract would be up, I just want a more flexible DH. I want to be able to rotate guys in and out of there, and I want to be able to have a roster full of guys who can play in the field if needed. And Marcell Ozuna just cannot play in the field at all, and that really hurts your lineup versatility. I mean, how often last year did you want to try to get some other guys some at-bats in that DH spot, and you just couldn't because you had to put Ozuna there because he can't play anywhere else? And I just don't want to get caught in that situation again unless I have Shohei Ohtani or Kyle Schwarber or the 2023 and 2024 versions of Marcell Ozuna. But even the 2025 version, I'm being a little too harsh on him. Still was a solid player, 114 WRC plus. And the past 2 years, he's handled both righties and lefties the same, 136 WRC plus against righties and a 134 WRC plus against the lefties. So I don't hate the idea. I'm not completely dismissive of the idea of bringing back Ozuna. It would have to be at a price point, though, if we continue to see some of the struggles we saw last year, and he's really just a guy that's going up there and walking, and he's cluttering up the DH spot. He's preventing you from having a more flexible lineups. Then I don't want any part of Ozuna. But if you can sign him at a contract in a deal where, okay, this isn't working out, we need to give him some days off here and there. We need to have more flexibility in the lineup. We need to get some other hot hands in there. Sean Murphy is crushing the baseball. He needs to be in that DH spot. That was one of the frustrations last year, is that when Murphy was actually performing well in the middle of the season, you were still running Ozuna out there in the DH spot because you couldn't put him anywhere else, and Ozuna wasn't performing at that point. So again, just to recap it all here, I don't mind bringing back Ozuna, but it has to be at a price point where if it's not working out, you don't mind, putting him on the bench and getting somebody else in there. All right, next, I want to get to the lefty killers in here that could also make sense for the Atlanta Braves to try to fill out the depth and roster. I'm going to give you some potential lineups as well and let you tell me which one you think works best for the Atlanta Braves. And we'll get into a little bit of news for these arbitration eligible players with that deadline looming on Friday. All that coming your way next. So we talked about some players for the Atlanta Braves to target who can hit righties, and that's generally what you want more of because you're going to face more righties, but also good to have some guys on your bench who can go after some lefties as well. One name that stood out here that was surprising was Miguel Andujar, who is a free agent, a 179 WRC plus against lefties the last 2 years. Now, that is just 154 plate appearances, and he is living off a very high batting average on balls in play against lefties at 445. It's a 397 batting average and a 445 BABIP over the last 2 years against lefties. I don't know how long he can keep that up, but it's worked out the past 2 years at least. And Andujar can play all corner spots, first, third, left, right if needed, but more so probably third at first base. Tyler O'Neill, he's owed a good bit of money by the Orioles, a little over $16 million in the next 2 years, money that I'm sure the Orioles would love to dump if they could. When healthy, though, which is a big if, and I don't know how many more injury-prone players you want to add to this lineup right now, but when healthy, he absolutely mashes left-handed pitching. A 380 ISO, league average is around 170. He has a 380 ISO against left-handed pitching the last 2 years. So again, I'm not all that keen on taking on that money. Maybe get the Orioles to eat a little bit of it. I'm not all that keen on taking a guy who has been severely injured over most of his career. But you want to talk about getting somebody that matches a lefties. You got a tough lefty late in the game. You bring O'Neill off the bench, and you got a good shot of finding one leaving the ballpark. Rob Refsnyder, though, he's been just as good against lefties the last 2 years. The 160 WRC plus is a free agent. He's done a good job with the Red Sox in the last several years, being that kind of left-handed the right-handed bat who comes in and crushes left-handed pitching. So that could be an option. Austin Hayes, a 160 WRC plus against lefties the last 2 years. He's had some issues staying healthy too, but again, like O'Neill, when healthy, absolutely crushes lefties. The Angels have already traded one outfielder who hits lefties pretty well. Maybe they'll trade another one in Joe Adell, 147 WRC plus against lefties the last 2 years. Has some speed in a corner outfield spot. He's okay. Can play center, but probably shouldn't. But maybe the Angels are still willing to part with another outfielder. They might be done with that for now. Tyler Fitzgerald, 133 WRC plus the last 2 years against lefties. However, in somewhat of a small sample size, and he came in the league on fire and has really cooled off since then. He was just awful last year for the Giants. They sent him back down. I don't even know if he's part of their plans anymore, but he does bring some other things too. He has great speed and can play all over, can play short, can play center, and is just a really good athlete. So again, not one that I'm necessarily too high on. I think maybe if you considered it an upgrade on the bench from Vidal Brujan, I wouldn't hate the idea of Tyler Fitzgerald, just as giving you another guy for speed and a guy that can play pretty much anywhere on the diamond. So again, not one that's at the top of my list, but certainly someone to think about. Jose Iglesias, 131 WRC plus against lefties the last 2 years. Veteran, leader, good clubhouse guy, can handle the shortstop position. Again, wouldn't hate it. Also would kind of stick it maybe to the Mets a little bit too in doing that. And then the final one here is Randall Grichuk, a guy I've talked about many times over the years to bring in as a lefty killer. Now, he wasn't nearly as good last year, but somebody that has over his career handled left-handing pitching really, really well. So that's your list of hitters right there. Some that can crush lefties, some that can crush righties. For me, if you're not going to get that big bat, if Dubón is going to be your shortstop, okay, but go out and get two of these guys. Go get one guy that can crush lefties. Go get one guy that can crush righties. Be able to mix and match your offense a little bit in that DH spot. Be able to have some good backup options if these guys don't perform, if these guys get healthy, and just build yourself that depth and that insurance and that flexibility that you just have not had the last 3 to 4 years with Marcell Ozuna just clogging up the DH spot. And look, in 2023, 2024, he was one of the best hitters in baseball. So you wanted to clog up that DH spot with him, but it also prevented you from mixing and matching your lineups because you couldn't put him in the field. And so being able to have some guys who can do that and that you can play matchups with, have some guys off the bench for late in the game and some defensive placements as well, some speed. I just love the idea of being able to have a full lineup that has a purpose. And for so many years, the Braves bench has just been ignored. So let me give you some potential lineups here as we start to wrap things up. If you just go get two of these guys, you're looking at, Acuna, Olsen, Riley, Baldwin, Profar, O'Hearn, Ozzie, Michael Harris, Dubón. It's still pretty solid. It's not, honestly, it's not too much different than the original lineup I gave you that had Murphy in there at the DH spot instead of Ryan O'Hearn, but you could platoon those two guys. And on your bench, you have Murphy, who, again, backup catcher, could use as a big right-handed bat off the bench. You have Donovan, who you can use as a guy, to plug in as well and fill in across the infield. You have Eli White as your backup outfielder and pinch runner. Brujan is a backup pinch runner and a guy that can come in and fill in just about anywhere. It feels like a much deeper lineup, in my opinion. I guess I should have given the full bench. Right now, it's like Brujan, White, Wisely, nothing really too exciting. Or there's a dream option where you have Acuna, Bellinger, Riley, Olsen, Profar, Baldwin. Could you imagine that's your first six? And you can mix and match that however you want. But a top six of Acuna, Bellinger, Riley, Olsen, Profar, and Baldwin, not going to be too many teams in baseball that match up with that. And not to mention Ozzie, Michael Harris, and Dubón at the bottom. Not too bad as well. And that's pretty good speed at the bottom of your lineup too. So again, you don't have to get the big bat. I understand that. It is a dream scenario. But you do have to do something. You cannot just sit here and say, Dubon's the guy at shortstop, and we're not getting any more depth. We're not getting any more insurance on our bench. We're going to roll with, these minor league guys. We're going to roll with the Brett Wileys of it all, Brujans, the Eli Whites of the world to be our backup options. I'm sorry. It doesn't sit well with me after what we've witnessed the last two seasons. So you want to go with Dubón as your shortstop. That's fine. But then you got more work to do to build out some depth in your lineup on your bench to help, be there in case of emergency and to try to help fill out the rest of the lineup to be able to mix and match against righties and lefties and just have a more complete lineup and to be able to play the game. Again, it's been somewhat frustrating watching this team, and not to take any shots at Brian Snitker, but to be watching the lineup decisions and it'd be so boring for one. And there's just there's a lack of creativity in putting a lineup together each and every night. And so I would love to be able to have the ability to do that, to say, we're going to give Michael Harris a night off and we're going to plug Harrison Bader in there against a lefty, something like that. It makes for more interesting lineups. It makes for better lineups. And when one of these guys eventually gets hurt, because what's going to happen, then you're not counting on the Brujans, the Wisleys of the world to come in and fill in. You're counting on a Brendan Donovan. You're counting on a Ryan O'Hearn. You're counting on a Randall Grichuk to come in and be able to fill in for these guys who have proven track records at the big league level. So let me know what you think about this all in the comment section down below. A little bit of news from the day here. The Braves did agree to terms with Vidal Brujan on a 1-year split contract for the 2026 season. So that's one of the arbitration eligible players already down. Didn't get the terms of that deal just yet. But it looks like Vidal Brujan will be part of the roster in some way. And I'm fine with that. Again, I'm fine with that. Eli White, Vidal Brujan as your last two bench spots, I'm fine with that. They're both guys who are there in case of emergency, but also has some value as pinch runners and defensive replacements. I'm fine with that. It's the other two spots in the lineup, the DH spot and the other bench spot that's not your backup catcher. And those are the two spots for me that need upgrading for this Braves team. Now, the other players that they have to make a decision on before the 6 p.m. Eastern deadline tomorrow are Mauricio Dubón, who they're obviously going to tender a contract to, Dylan Lee as well. I believe Eli White as well. I think the big question marks are Alek Manoah, Jose Suarez, and Joey Wentz. Are those three guys going to be tendered a contract by the 6 p.m. deadline tomorrow night? And that's what we'll have to see and find out. Tomorrow, though, we will have our mailbag episode. Again, I look for a post from Lockdown_Braves on X asking for your questions. Submit your questions to that post to be answered on Friday afternoon's mailbag episode. Probably going to start a little bit earlier than normal on Friday, so just be on the lookout for that. But that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for joining us here today, especially those who were able to join us here live. Appreciate your support. Video Moon and Everyday our PJs as well. MVP Profar in here. Thank you all for joining me live. Tough as nails. I appreciate you, Leesmore as well, who says, I'm the guy. I appreciate that. I hope you have a great rest of your night. Matt Karcher as well. Thank you all for your support here on the podcast. Again, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.